Hello, my name is Mike Johnson. I'm the National Director with Data Recognition Corporation for the TABE test, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today we'll be going through some TABE updates and general best practices and other resources that are available or available soon. As we get started, if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A button within the Zoom menu. And at the end of the presentation, I will have my email address if you have any additional questions. So let's get started today. And just a quick update on where we stand with TABE and TABE Class E. You'll hear me mention both TABE 11 and 12 and TABE Class E today throughout the webinar. TABE 11 and 12, as most people know, is the federally approved assessment for adult basic education and adult secondary. TABE Class E is our approved assessment for adult ESL students. Both are available with paper and pencil formats or computer-based formats. So if you are using TABE online for a TABE 11 and 12, you can also use TABE Class E. We have several programs within Florida using TABE Class E. So if you need references, we can certainly provide that to you. As we're going through where the timeline of each assessment is, TABE 11 and 12, we have started to look at the format and the frameworks for TABE 13 and 14 as our federal approval is coming up for renewal in the middle of 2024. Same with TABE Class E, our federal approval is renewing at the middle of next year. So we are in development of our new forms for Form C and D for TABE Class E. Again, if you do need more information on the specifics, we certainly can provide that to you. I wanted to also kind of touch on where TABE is used within different programs. Primarily in the top left corner, many programs are WIOA funded through the Florida Department of Education, and TABE is certainly used in that area. On the left-hand side with corrections, whether it's the state corrections or county prisons or county jails, TABE is often used in those areas as well for educational purposes. Sometimes those correctional programs are funded through WIOA, so those two areas might merge together. On the bottom part of the graph, we have college placement, and over on the bottom right-hand corner, high school equivalency alternatives. There are many colleges that use TABE as a placement tool, not as an acceptance tool, but as a placement tool into the for-credit or non-credit programs, depending on a student's ability. And also there are some states around the country that are doing pilot programs to determine if a TABE reading and math score might be applicable for high school equivalency acceptance in lieu of the reading and math score of a standard high school equivalency test, GED or HiSET. And again, those are state-driven pilot programs. Several states are looking at ways to shorten the testing process for students, and if tests are online into the same college and career readiness standards, could there be multiple uses for those tests? The last area is the workforce placement up in the top right corner. And in Florida, many sheriff's departments use TABE in a workforce scenario. Many healthcare programs use TABE also. But all across the country, there are different programs that use TABE. The Jim Beam Distillery in Kentucky uses TABE for many jobs in their distillery. The Dow Chemical factories in South Carolina use that. There are dairy farms in Pennsylvania and many different companies, unions, labor unions as well, that use TABE as part of their screening process for employment. A lot of these programs do go through community colleges that do offer TABE testing. So they're not testing prospective employees directly. They send them to partner organizations within the area for that. So we'll see a little bit more activity in those areas. Tying into that workforce preparation, we are adding on a new portal for TABE 11 and 12, and it's our Workforce Readiness Portal. It will be launching a little bit later this fall. And what the Workforce Portal does is it connects the job descriptions to your TABE reading and math scores to align and help predict success in those specific career areas. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on to additional slides. This workforce portal is in part with a research company in North Carolina called Metametrics. Many of you are aware of Metametrics because they develop Lexile reading measures and quantile math measures in the K-12 world. So we have done an alignment with Metametrics to align our TABE reading and math scores to the job requirements for over 700 jobs that are listed on the Department of Labor's ONET website. One of the other byproducts of this, and we'll discuss this a little bit later, is that Lexiles and quantiles are normative scores that are normed on a pretty annual basis, and it's going to help us provide a new white paper that aligns TABE scores to grade ranges, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. I have a couple of screenshots that will show related to the workforce portal, and a couple of reminders. This workforce portal is for TABE administrators or counselors or teachers. It is not student driven. There's been some discussion about that for future versions, but this initial version is driven by a TABE user, whether it's an administrator, a teacher, or a proctor. They would go into the TABE portal, they would go into the workforce area, and then they would be able to search for a student. So here we put in the different student information, first name, last name, potentially their ID number, and then go ahead and select what report measures we're looking for based on their TABE score or based on a Lexile score, and we'll see a couple of those. Once we, if we don't have a specific student, we can look up a group of students. So here we have a list of students that are from our TABE online account. So we could pull up those areas as well and select specific students if we didn't have one specific student that we were looking for. So a couple of ways to get started. The next step is, once you have the student selected, is to select a career field for that student. So this is where the Department of Labor's ONET information comes in. All jobs within the United States are classified into 16 career cluster fields. And so we see that on the left-hand side of this field is architecture and construction. Within architecture and construction, there are hundreds of different jobs that relate to that. One of them that we've selected is electrical power line installer and repairer. So that's a specific job that's listed in the Department of Labor's website. We see down below that this job is a high school graduate level education, and then also has some additional experience preferred for mechanical and physics related to that job. What we also now have is looking at the scale scores related to that job. We see in the summary that the target reading area for an electrical power line installer is a 616. The math is a 576, and then we'll see how that student's TABE scores align to that. And I apologize for the graph being off. This is a chart that I pulled from our development site that was just using fictitious data. And so I have one that's a little bit misrepresented with the 605 being higher than the 616. But on the math, we see that the 605 is above the required area. So in this case, the student's math scores are above the target range for success based on the reading and math requirements from the measures that Metametrics has done on the analysis of the reading levels and the math levels required for that position. We can also see that same chart based on the Lexiles. Lexiles and quantiles, again, many K-12 textbooks are Lexiled. There are a few adult education text materials that are Lexiled, but also the majority of library books are Lexiled. So if you do need to find reading materials at a certain Lexile level, you'll be able to see that. So again, we'll have the data displayed in a couple of different areas, but graphically, we're showing the student where they need to be and where they're currently at based on their TABE score. So you might be above or below the required reading and math level for that specific position that you selected. Also, pulling from the ONET website, that job of electrical power line installer has some key tasks that are listed for it. And on the left-hand side, we see one of the first key tasks is adhere to safety practices and procedures. that's a pretty generic task that is applicable to a lot of different careers. And we see that down below that there's a couple of careers listed that are similar, and that have a similar list of tasks as the electrical power line installer. So that student might find out that that career as an electrical power line installer requires climbing poles that are over 100 feet tall, and they might have a fear of heights. So now they want to look at maybe elevator and escalator repair, or a different career field that might have the same high level tasks that are required of that job. So again, aligning to what that student's experience is, but also what their levels of readiness are related to reading and math. Other additional information from the ONET career site that will pull into the TABE Workforce Portal is the salary information. So we see the median pay for this position across the country. There's also a graphical representation on the right-hand side that lists the growth expectations by state for that position. Lighter shaded areas are less growth, higher shaded areas are more growth. So for this specific area, we see a lot of growth in the central part of the United States, and maybe not as much growth around the southern part of the state. So each career area will be a little bit different on their growth expectations. So, and you'll also be able to narrow in based on the zip code as well. One part that I don't have a screenshot for that I'd like to talk about a little bit is going back to the selection for this career area of electrical power line installer. So I have a student that I'm working with as a counselor, as a teacher, as an administrator, and they've told me that they're interested in our electrical power line work. So I'm searching on that career, I'm pulling up the math and reading requirements and how their TABE scores align to that. But you might have a student that is undecided on what they want to go into, but they have taken a TABE test. So we will have an alternate method of selecting careers by putting in your TABE scores and having a list of careers be presented for that student to review. So I don't have a screenshot for that today because that's still in development, but just be aware that you can search for careers based on the specific career area, or you can pull up a list of careers based on your TABE scores in two different ways. As a phase 2, so everything I've described to you is kind of phase 1 that's launching later this fall. As a phase 2, we are going to have a growth planner added to the portal. So again, showing you in a graphical area where your TABE score is and where your target score would be for a specific job along the scale of TABE, but then also linking into curriculum partners. And that's the part that's still in development. So right now we see links to Aztec or Essential Ed or New Readers Press or KEP, and how those link in and do they open up an existing account and what resources are available. We're working with those publishers to determine that now. Or are there other resources? We've also been in contact with Crowded Learning. If you're familiar with Crowded Learning, they're a not-for-profit association that part of World Education that collects free resources for educational purposes that are aligned to college and career readiness standards and also aligned to TABE standards. So we're looking at what is the best way to link over to targeted instructional materials that customers may have from one of the publishers or may need from some of the free resources, and be able to link in and help students specifically improve on their deficient areas related to TABE. The other area on the Workforce Portal is the cost. This is an add-on feature to the Workforce Portal. It will be available again later this fall for $2.50 per student. Initially, in the next few weeks, you'll see a promotional start that has an early adopter price of $1.75. That is, again, per student per year. So a little bit different than the way you purchase TABE today, where you're purchasing each test individually. the way the workforce portal will work is that if you have a student and they test in January and July and October, you'll be able to go into the portal for that same initial $2 fee or $2.50 fee and pull up different workforce reports throughout the year. So again, it's per student per year that the portal will have the fees for. We'll again have a little bit more available on that in the next few weeks when we start launching the order form and the promotional offer for the workforce portal. The next area that I want to review is some additional resources that are available for TABE and TABE Class E. The first area that we'll talk about is within our TABE portal itself. So if you're using TABE Online, you're using TABE Offline, or you're scanning your answer sheets, you do that all today through the portal within our Insight platform. Within that Insight platform, there is a general information area that contains all of our secure documents. So whether they're the administration manuals, the test directions, any of our technical manuals, all of that information is within the portal, and you can always access that under the General Information tab. We also have a free resource area on our public website, that's tabetest.com. And within tabetest.com, there is a resource tab, and I'm going to go ahead and click over there right now. So we'll have that open up here in a second through the browser. And so we're at the public website of tabetest.com, and I have the resource tab in the middle of the screen. Within the resource tab, we have several tools that are available for programs, whether it's TABE 11 and 12 or TABE Class E, and I'll look at some of the TABE 11 and 12 resources. Over on the expanded list, a couple of the first areas that we'll look at is our practice items and our blueprints. So I'll go ahead and open up the practice items real quick. If you want to help students prepare for a TABE test, prepare for the types of questions that they're going to see on the test, you can do that in a couple of different ways. In a paper and pencil format, you can go to the sample questions on the website and print off, and I'll open up Reading Level M, and we see it starts out with an essay related to whale watching, and then there's 7 questions related to that essay. As we see the questions come up, what type of whale can be seen by whale watchers on both East and West Coast, and we can scroll down. After question 7, there is an answer key provided, so you have the answers to each of these questions, or these practice questions. This is one way to expose students to the types of questions that they're going to be measured on during TABE. Many programs know that there's always a sample question or a group of sample questions before a student starts a TABE test. These practice items are the exact same question. So the psychometric purpose for that is to expose the students to the types of questions they are going to be measured on. And we can do that in a couple of different ways. We could do that with these printed versions that might be done through intake or orientation, or we can do that with the practice questions right at the start of the TABE test. Going back to tabetest.com and going back to our resource tab, looking at a couple of other resources that are available. Under the math category, let me drive there again. Under math, we have the reference sheets that are listed. Again, another hard copy format of what's also available on TABE Online as a reference tool built into the system, but we have the formulas for each level of TABE. So we see the formula sheet for the locator. If we can scroll down, we see formulas for level E. And what you'll notice is that the formulas start to grow in the types of formulas that are being used. So we see perimeter and area listed on the level E formula sheet. If I scroll down to level M, we still see perimeter and area, but we add volume and conversion. So we have those areas. And if we go down to level D, we still have perimeter and area. We have circumference. Now we have a little bit more related to area and the Pythagorean theorem. So instead of handing a student the level A formula sheet that includes all the formulas, we want to make sure that we're providing the formula sheet specific to the test. If they are using TABE Online, they are built into the test, so students have access to the formula icons when they're taking the test, but some students might prefer hard copy, and some teachers might prefer to use the formula sheets in class as well, so that students understand what formulas that they're going to experience on the TABE test. A couple of other areas to go through for resources for teachers specifically is again under TABE 11 and 12, under the Blueprint area. I'll open up the TABE Blueprint, and I've shown these quite a few times in different webinars, but I'll open up level A math as an example, and I'll try to make this a little bit bigger. So on level A math, we see that there are 5 sections of the pie chart that represents the 5 areas of the college and career readiness that are being covered on level A. So there are more sections of math under college and career readiness, but level A is addressing 5 specific areas. From a teaching perspective, I can tell very quickly that 2 of the areas cover over 50% of the test. So algebra and functions cover over half the test. And as a teacher, that's helpful to understand where the questions are coming from. For a little bit more detail, I can scroll down, and the color coding is carried over on the left-hand side. So we see geometry with 15%. And within that geometry area, there are 4 subdomains or 4 skill descriptions. Looking at the title or the wording of that skill description for the first one, it says no precise definition of angle, circle, perpendicular line. And that's a low emphasis at level A. We might see that same description on a level M or level D math test, but it might be at a higher emphasis because we're introducing that standard and that skill at a lower level. Here we're reviewing it at level A, so it's only a low emphasis, and that's in contrast with the third one down that says use volume formulas for cylinders, pyramids, cones, and spheres, and we see that as a high emphasis area because that is a targeted skill at level A of TABE for 11 and 12. So the blueprints are great resources for teachers. They can understand where the target concepts are being covered the most within each level of TABE, so they can help with the lesson planning and curriculum planning for that aspect. And as I mentioned, there is a blueprint for every level and every content area of TABE. Even if we open up the level M blueprint, which is a very busy blueprint because there's lots of standards being covered, we can still see 3 content areas, maybe 4 if we count the green one, 3 or 4 taking up almost 3/4 of the test. So yes, there are 5 other content areas that are being covered on level M, but at a lesser extent because there's very few questions coming from those areas. So again, the blueprints are a great resource in aligning curriculum to the expectations of what's being covered on each TABE test. For TABE 11 and 12, some other resources that we have is a crosswalk. So as again, from teachers and curriculum planners, as you're preparing, we can open up the crosswalk and we can compare the TABE definition to the college and career readiness definition. Many of the publishing partners use the college and career readiness standard numbers, or they use the standard description, but on a TABE report, you'll see a shorter summary description. So on the left-hand side, we see the TABE description. On the right-hand side, we see the full college and career readiness description for that same area. So within the reading test on level M, within key ideas and details, we see the support of stated inference with detail from the text might be on our TABE report as a strength or a weakness, and we can align that directly to our curriculum materials that we have on hand. In an announcement that we made a couple of weeks ago, we now are transferring our TABE skills, or we have the ability to transfer our TABE skills to Essential Education to be loaded right into their curriculum platform. So if you're a program that uses Essential Education and wants to have your TABE student data go right into that platform so that they can automatically build custom learning paths, that's something that's available. We are working on other publishers. We're working with Aztec for TABE 11 and 12. We're working with Burlington English as well for TABE Class E skills. So trying to remove some of the work that it takes to assign lessons to students, whether they're taking quizzes or you're hand entering TABE skill information into those learning systems. Well, if we can transfer the data over and build custom learning paths for the student, that allows for more time for teachers to focus in on instruction. A couple of other resources real quick. On the bottom here, we have an online tools training. The online tools training is, again, a great resource for students that are new to computer-based testing. Some students might come in, they may have a phone, but they're not too sure what to do with a computer while they're taking a test. And so we provide a link down at the bottom of the screen to open up our testing window and take a practice test using the TABE online system. So if I open up that link here, we see this is exactly what a student would see when they go to take a TABE test. The only thing that's missing is another button on the screen that says log in. Right now, the only active button is the online tools training. And I can go ahead and click on that online tools training, and you'll see that we have content areas for all of TABE 11 and 12, reading, math, language, and the new writing test. So if you're interested in what's being covered on the writing test, samples are available within the online tutorial, but also for TABE Class E. Under the Florida program, you use reading and listening, but there is a writing and speaking test approved for NRS reporting. But in Florida, the required areas are reading and listening. So you can certainly go in and look through the reading and listening sample questions for TABE Class E. I'm going to go into the reading section. I'm going to go back to TABE Level M. I'll do the standard area, not the text-to-speech audio version. And what I'm required to do is to log in, and we provide that login information right at the top of the screen instead of handing the student a test ticket. So I'll go ahead and type this in and go ahead and hit enter. Now I'm welcomed into the system based on my student's name at the top of the screen. Then I see what test level they're taking, what ID number they were entered in under, and I can go ahead and continue to the next screen. The next screen will show all the tests that are assigned to me as a student. I'm in the TABE reading tutorial, so the only test that's assigned to me right now is the reading level M tutorial. But if I was assigned a math or a language test, it could be listed here as well for the student to click on and take that test. I'll click on that link, and now the difference between paper-based testing and computer-based testing is that the student starts to work themselves through the directions. This is the online tools training module, so you're getting directions related to the online tools training resources, how to use some of the pointers and the flag buttons that they'll see in the testing system, and then also navigating forward and backwards. After the last screen, we'll see 3 gray circles. It says if you don't see those circles, to raise your hand because your computer is not operating correctly. So this is a last little technology check. But then we go ahead and begin the test. And the first thing we see is an essay about whale watching. We've already seen that because we pulled up the PDF for that. And remember, it said what type of whale can be seen by whale watchers on both the East and West Coast. And I can go ahead and click on an answer for that and go to the next question. And my essay remains the same, but I can go ahead and select an answer. I could flag a question. I could highlight parts of the text if I need to. I could cross off some of the answers. If you teach test-taking strategy, you might tell a student to eliminate known wrong answers, and then they could get down to a 50-50 choice. I could increase the magnification if needed. Again, this is probably done more so with students that are working with math questions and have graphs that they want to see a little bit bigger, but I can do that with any TABE test itself. There's a line guide if I need a straight edge for reading. If this was a math test, we would have the formula sheet and the calculator listed up at the top as well. We also have the ability to change the color and font of the test if needed. So a lot of different ones. We can change just the color of the background. We can change the color and font together. And this is, again, student driven. So if they have a modification that they would like to take the test in, and again, in a paper and pencil world, that might be a color overlay, but here they can change the color and font. And better to practice in this tutorial than to practice when the clock is running in an actual test. But they can even reverse the contrast to make everything black that was white and everything that white is black. So we can do that as well. Lots of different options for the students to go through. I can go ahead and click to the next question, make an answer. I can even skip a question if I need to. Eventually, I will get back to near the end of the samples. Remember, there were 7 questions. Question number 7 shows us an example of a 2-part question for TABE reading. So it says, which of these is the main idea of the article? And I can select an answer, but part 2 now asks me to provide the evidence for that answer. Which sentence from the article best supports the answer in part A? So I'm selecting a specific answer that supports my previous answer. After that, they bring up a summary that tells us I answered questions 1, 2, and 3. I skipped 4, 5, and 6, and I answered question 7. And I have the ability to go backwards to the questions or to end the test. And I'll go ahead and end the test now. And again, this is a great way to expose students to the sample questions, but also expose them to the computer-based technology so that if they need to, they can practice and get over any technology anxiety or test anxiety. As I mentioned, this is a link on the resource tab, so you can use this in class. I know of programs that send this link out during registration so that students can click on that and go ahead and take the sample test so that they know what they're expected to do when they arrive on the day of the intake testing. So you have a lot of different options, whether you wanted to do it on a computer-based format or in the TABE 11 and 12 under the sample items and have a paper and pencil version of that. I'll come back to that, but let me jump back to our slide presentation. I wanted to mention that TABE offline is available. Most programs in Florida do use TABE online, but if you have a need for computer-based testing without an internet connection, that is available, so we can certainly support that. It was initially developed for the Windham School District, which is the Texas Department of Corrections, because they were paper-based and they were not able to switch to online testing. Florida Department of Corrections certainly does online testing, so it might be in the local county jail scenarios that you might have a need for offline testing. Offline testing allows a laptop from a proctor or administrator or an advisor to be connected to the internet prior to testing, then get disconnected and move over to the right-hand side in the offline world, and that laptop is connected to a local network, let's say a classroom of computers that are in a secure area or in a remote area that does not have strong internet connection, whatever the case might be, and then they can deliver that test and have the responses collected on the laptop. The laptop then would go back to the left-hand side and connect to our portal after testing and upload all the scores for all the responses for scoring and reporting. Again, the offline piece, the proctor can register students. They can follow the progress of the student for that as well, and they can go ahead and collect the data and then go back to the administrative area and upload the responses. The official name is TABE Offline Digital Testing. So it is a digital version of our paper test. Looks a little bit different than TABE Online. It has a digital representation of the test booklet on the left-hand side and then an active answer sheet on the right-hand side. So the student is still clicking on the bubbles on the answer sheet on the right-hand side as they go through the test pages on the left-hand side of the page. Looking at whether I take a test on offline or online or paper and pencil and I scan my answer sheets, I have from all 3 options, I have access to the same report. And there are several different reports available. The first one is the most popular one, the individual profile report. We also have a portfolio report available. The difference between the portfolio and the profile is that the portfolio is just a summary of scores from all the tests the student has taken, where the profile is the detail of one of those testing occurrences. So if I took a test in January and July and October, but I only wanted to see the July details, that would be a profile. If I want to see a summary of all the scores on one report, that would be the portfolio. If you do the locator as a standalone test, many programs use the auto locator, both with TABE 11 and 12 and TABE Class E. They both have an auto locator, but they both also have a freestanding locator test that can be delivered, and you can then run the locator report for that. In the TABE online system, there is test sessions, and students are registered into each test session. If you want to pull up a roster of that session, that would be the roster group report. Some people call that a teacher report, but what we find in TABE is that students are registered before being assigned to a teacher in a lot of cases. So these are a group of students that were in the same test session, and you want to have a group report for that. If you have a need to group students after testing, you can go ahead and use the local exporting, which is called the on-demand extract. Within the portal, you have access to pull out your own data in an Excel file and sort that data whichever way you need to. You can sort you can pull the data for your whole account, or just yesterday or this week or last month. So you have a lot of different options on exporting the data out. We also have the ability to send data on a nightly basis to other data sources. We do this in a lot of different states directly into their state data system. Since Florida is a little bit unique in the data side, they don't have a standard required data system at the state level. We don't extract at the state level, but many school districts we send the data to nightly. For example, Miami-Dade, we send them their data on a nightly basis to import into their database locally for that. So that's certainly an option if you want to have your data extracted automatically on a nightly basis and sent to your local database. We can certainly accommodate that. And you can just contact me if you need more information, or I'll also have our support number at the end of this report. This bulk extract that we send to state level or to the school level is also the same file that we send to our curriculum partners, because it contains the strengths and weakness section of the TABE report. Looking at that TABE report briefly, just to review what we're looking at, this is an individual profile for TABE 11 and 12. We have a student above the blue shaded bar, and then we have where they tested below that blue shaded bar. In the gray shaded area, we have what tests they took, what date they took those tests, how many points were available, how many points they obtained, what their scores were, and on the far right-hand side, what their measurable skills gain outcome was. The measurable skills gain is based on July 1st. We only look backwards to July 1st. So that is one area that you want to make sure to remember. This student tested in October. This measurable skills gain is looking back to July 1st, so only 3 months backwards, saying, did their NRS level improve since July? And the answer here is yes. So somewhere between July and October, the student took a test. It was below an NRS level 4, and this test in October is an improvement, so we mark a yes in there. It is not tied to the state policy if the state allows carryover scores from May or June. Just be aware that it always resets on July 1st. At the bottom of the page, what we notice on the left-hand side is the TABE domains, which are the sections of the blueprints that we saw earlier. So we know the key ideas and details, craft and structure, and integration of knowledge and ideas would be the pie within the pie chart for level M of reading. But now we can dig a little deeper and see that there's 18 questions for key ideas, 17 questions for craft and structure, and 5 questions for knowledge, integration of knowledge and ideas. And then a little bit deeper, even more, we see 18 questions with 18 points, 17 questions with 20 points available, and 5 questions with 9 points available. So now as a teacher, I even know where the 2-point questions are coming from within the objective areas for TABE 11 and 12. So I know key ideas and details does not have any of those 2-point questions because there's 18 questions with 18 points. So it's all 1-point questions. Same thing with math. We can review that information as well. I don't have language. It's cut off on the bottom of the page here. The second page of this report has the demonstrated skills and the areas of next focus on the right-hand side, but the left-hand side, again, is the blueprint domain areas. So we see key ideas and details, craft and structure, integration of knowledge and ideas. And remember from page 1, I did very well on this reading test. I answered almost all the questions correctly, so I'm marked as full proficiency. So on the second page, I do have some demonstrated skills because I answered a lot of the questions correct, but I also have some areas of next focus. These areas of next focus are important because they are elevated to level D. I am marked as fully proficient at level M, so my weaknesses would be the next level TABE. If my performance was listed as partial or non-proficient, then my areas of next focus are directly related to the level of the test I took. I didn't do very well if I'm non-proficient, so I have some areas to work on at level M to improve. So just remember, if you do see the word full proficiency, that the skills are projecting up to the next level of TABE, and that would coincide with you elevating that student into a higher level class potentially based on their scores. For TABE Class E, it's a very similar report, except it's an orange bar at the top, and we see the student's name above. We see the testing location below. We see all the content areas that they might take on the test. And then in the bottom, we again see the domain areas on the left. So we see quantitative literacy, read words, reading comprehension, and how the student did. And then also on the second page, we see their demonstrated skills and their areas of next focus related to those domain areas as well. So very much the same format and same information for the ESL students that are taking TABE Class E. So additional updates that we have, I've talked about TABE writing briefly. That is available in the online format only. It is a little bit different because it does have 15 multiple choice questions and then a constructed response essay at the end. So it does not use a locator. It's applicable for any student taking M, D, or A of TABE. So just know that they're not taking a locator to go into writing. You're assigning a writing test to somebody that has taken an M, D, or A reading or language test for that purpose. We talked about offline a little bit. Over on the right-hand side, we mentioned the updates to TABE Class E coming in the next year or so, switching from forms A and B to C and D. Not a big change on the foundation because our objectives are not changing. We also saw the updates in the reports. We've added the auto locator. We've added those skills on the individual diagnostic profile as well. We are still working on an ability to benefit approval with the U.S. Department of Education's Financial Aid Office, and that would allow students access to federal financial aid, the Pell Grant, without having a high school diploma or equivalency. There are some colleges that use the ability to benefit program, and this would be a benefit for them to be able to utilize a TABE score for acceptance. So we are still working on that as well. One additional resource that I didn't cover from the TABE resource tab is some concordance work that we've done with the high school equivalency test. So we had students take the TABE test and then also take the high school equivalency test and look at that correlated data. And what it shows is that a student that gets a 536 on level M or above of TABE has a strong likelihood of passing the GED test at that minimum level of a 145. Now, strong likelihood is kind of a generic scientific word. So, again, they may have a strong likelihood of passing at the minimum threshold. If we looked at all the scores for TABE, we would know that a 536 is the start of NRS level 4. So students that are at the start of NRS level 4 doing very well on a level M test, that's where a 536 would come in, is it starts at the level M test that is at a high performance level, or level D or level A can get a 536 as well. Students that get a 536 have a likelihood of passing. It's not saying that they're going to guarantee to pass, but they have a strong likelihood. The challenge to remember is that a 145 is the passing score for the high school equivalency test. It is a great accomplishment for students to pass their high school equivalency, but passing at a 145 has the alignment to somebody going through the high school and getting C's and D's in the public high school world. So, you minimally pass high school or you minimally pass your GED test. Are you ready for the next step? And typically not. Again, on a general sense, most students that pass at a 145 may not be successful at the next area. They've earned their credential, but they may not be ready for the rigors of a post-secondary world, or to be ready to be eligible for a career area that would provide a sustainable wage. And we see that supported by the tests themselves, because the GED has a college ready score. So that 165, if a student scores a 165 on the GED, they have a much higher success rate in the post-secondary world. They're eligible for better jobs on a career scale for that. And so we see that students that get a 627 on level D or above on the reading test, again, have a likelihood of obtaining that secondary cut score, that college ready score from the GED. And then the third one, the GED college ready plus credit, is students that get that 721 on level A or level A of TABE. From the math perspective, that's a 537. It does fill in at the same area of the start of NRS level 4. And I know that that's been a challenge in a lot of Florida programs of students not being in NRS level 5, but being ready for their high school equivalency. And that's an area that we do continue to work with the Department of Ed on, and providing them as much data as we can to update those policies and programs. And as I mentioned earlier, one of those is some additional research that we're working on with Metametrics to align TABE scores to grade ranges. Lexiles and quantiles from Metametrics are normed on a national basis on a yearly kind of renewing period. So we have very accurate normative data on what is being obtained as a ninth grade, a 10th grade, a 12th grade across the national perspective. Again, when we think about grade ranges and grade scores, having a student take level A of TABE that may or may not be the 12th grade of content as defined by the U.S. Department of Education, that's what they're defining as 12th grade. But what is not defined is 12th grade including AP classes, or is it including just the general level classes? And what is your perception of 12th grade or 8th grade? And so there's a lot of interpretation when we talk about grade ranges, and that's why we've had to do a lot of additional research, but this is going to be very helpful. This report will be posted in the next few weeks. Is our plan to post it to tabetest.com to have some new grade range documentation, and also to share that with the DOE so that we can better align the CTE requirements within the state of Florida for that. So I would encourage you to always kind of watch the TABE test website, and also look in that resource tab. When we do post that, we certainly will have some more email information available for that. There's been a couple of questions that have come in. One of them about having the slides available, and again, my email will be available, but it'll all be available through the IPDAY, so you'll have that. And a couple of other questions about what's the difference in scores from paper and pencil to online, and the correlations are not the same in terms of the points. And that is a good point. The difference between online and paper is that there are some questions that take advantage of the technology in the online world. So if we have a question that is dragging and dropping or fill in the blank, some of those you cannot replicate within the paper and pencil world. Some of them you can. We do have two-part reading questions in paper and pencil, and we do have them in the online world. Where they fit within the scale, so some of those questions, our research team, if there's a question in the online world that is a drag and drop, for example, or a fill in the blank, they have a corresponding question that measures the same skill, but it is done typically in a multiple choice fashion. That multiple choice fashion may have a little bit less statistical value related to how it's aligned to the standards, and also the p-value is what they rank it on. But from a statistical standpoint, it might be an easier question. They adjust that on our scale. So what you find on our scale is that on TABE Online, and I don't have a specific example memorized, but getting 400 points might be NRS level 4 on TABE level D, but you'd have to get 404 points on a paper test because those questions were a little less rigorous because they did not have the ability to use the technology. So the questions are the same over 90% of the test, but there are a few questions where the technology, they're all measuring the same standards, but it's a little bit different. There's also a question about using the online tools training in a published form. I think we've had that question come up of, can you print those screens? And right now I don't think you can, but it is something that we're working on. Again, most of the sample questions that you can print from the sample page of the resources are the exact same that's in the TABE online world, but not the look and feel. But we have had that request before, so certainly we'll continue to work on getting printable versions of the online tools training. Let me go back to our presentation. And I'm gonna stop here quick just to leave my email and our phone number for our support team. The support team is available for online testing, paper and pencil testing, or scanning, and you can go ahead and use that. I'm gonna try to slide this out of the way a little bit. So I'll move it down to the bottom here maybe. We also have through IPDAY the feedback for the webinar. So if you can take a few minutes and do the webinar, again, I'll move it around. So if you need my email is just mjohnson@datarecognitioncorp.com. So it's a little lengthy, but it's fairly easy. But again, if you have a few minutes just to complete the feedback here as we end the webinar, that would be very appreciative. This webinar is being recorded, so it will be saved on the IPDAY website for you to come back to or send colleagues to. If you have any questions, if you need any answers that we didn't cover today, you can certainly send me an email. And again, it's mjohnson@datarecognitioncorp.com. But hopefully I had time to answer these 3 quick feedback questions. I do appreciate your time today. I do look forward to seeing anybody that might be coming to the ACE conference a little bit later next month, I believe it is, or in October. We're anticipating more information related to our workforce portal that we'll have available at the ACE conference. So I want to thank you again. And if you have any additional questions, please send me an email, but I look forward to meeting up with you at a later time. Thank you very much.